This artwork might look completely deranged and over the top, but I'm telling you, absolutely anyone can do this. The creatures were all created with the same simple technique repeated over and over again. Pen tool compositing to chop out each creature, shadows added using exposure adjustment layer, camera raw filter to match the lighting, then white eyes added to ramp up the horror factor. Rinse and repeat for each creature, that's literally it. In this video, I'll be reacting to the process of creating this artwork and sharing all these tips as we go along. Shooting from the hip, totally unscripted, gonna be a fun one. Full artwork PSD is available as a download in the description. Let's crack on. So you'll find when you're doing a larger piece like this, about 3/4 of the work is cutting stuff out. We call it compositing in the business. Now my favourite method for cutting things out is the pen tool. To activate the pen tool, just hit P and that will give you access to that. Now if you don't know how to use pen tool, there are a million tutorials on YouTube. I've also done a couple myself. So this video isn't about going through how to use pen tool. This is more so showing you the pen tool in action for creating complex composites like this. Now the original idea that I had was that I wanted to do something really garish and colourful for Halloween. So we've got a stock bundle coming out. That's currently half price if you wanted to grab that. Link in the description. But I didn't want to go for the muted, moody, dark and black and white. I wanted to go for something really colourful and over the top. So that was the logic behind this piece. Now you can see the scene coming together here. We have the fairground background, some cloud elements for the skyline, a banshee from our Halloween bundle as the main kind of hero piece for the image. And here you can see these different elements being built up. Now all of the fairground stuff and the background elements I got from Adobe stock. I've put the file names and a link for every single one of them in the description. So if you wanted to grab any of these elements, go down to the description and you'll find the links for absolutely everything there. Now the ground element that I used was actually from the PM floors bundle. So it's just a bundle that's got nothing but floors. Really handy for when you want to lay down something really quick. That's exactly what that bundle was created for. Where you don't want to spend an hour on a micro stock website finding a floor element when you just got a folder with loads of them. So another little plug there for the floors bundle. I use it all the time. Very, very handy. To the right you've got the layer stack and you can see this piece being incrementally built up. Now what I've done is I've included a link to this full PSD, and all of the layers and all of the groups and the adjustment layers are named. So because a React video like this is quite fast, what I thought would be good is to give you the full PSD download so you can go through, pick it apart, reverse engineer and figure out all of the adjustment layers that have been used, all of the processing layers, so you can do that in your own time. So for now we're just going through the rough edit and the rough cut. Now the footage for this one was actually 10 hours long. There were 10 hours worth of time-lapse footage. As you can see, it's quite an elaborate piece, so it took me a long time to do. And I've edited out all of the long-winded pen tool stuff. You don't want to watch a video for 10 hours with just me doing the pen tool, unfortunately. So here you can see all of the different creepy fairground elements being chopped out using pen tool paths, and then you make a selection, you delete the bits as needed and then copy the bits as needed and bring it over to the document. So here you can see some of the fairground elements being chopped out from their original stock photos to be brought in to the main composite. So that's what's going on the screen right now. I really love these little floating skeleton things. I thought they looked quite creepy in a weird childlike way, these floating skeletons. And I used 3 different photographs for different angles, so it wasn't just one repeated over again. Now these Cthulhu octopus things are from the Halloween bundle that we just put out a couple of days ago. And what I wanted to do was grab the tentacles on their own, not the full creature. So again, pen tool, draw a path around the bits that I wanted, right click on that path, go make selection, edit, and then copy that over into the document where we're building everything up. So I've included a little bit of footage here just to show you the process of selectively removing part of these Cthulhu tentacles to be used for the main piece and spliced together with the creatures. So the banshee alone wasn't enough for me, not enough cowbell. I wanted a deranged, demonic, possessed creature that had loads of tentacles, make it more of a fun piece. So that's what you're seeing on screen right now. These tentacle elements being selectively chopped out to be brought into the wider composite. Now, when you've got a PSD document this big, it can be hard navigating between all of these layers, and there's a really small, easy trick that you can use. When you've got the move tool activated, the shortcut for that is V on the keyboard. You can put on auto select. If you look there at the top left on the dialog where move is selected, you can simply click on the layer that you want to get to and you'll find it really fast. Now, if you don't have that auto select enabled, it can be really long-winded navigating for all the layers to try and find the one that you want. So that's a little quick tip there for finding the layer that you want to work with in a really fast manner. Bringing these tentacles and editing and updating this creature, nothing groundbreaking here. All it is chopping out the parts that I don't need and then using a layer mask and a large brush just set to black, nothing fancy there, and using old-fashioned layer mask to blend those elements in. And here you can see me browsing that Cthulhu octopus from the Halloween bundle to get the tentacles and elements that I need to build up this creature. And it wasn't just the creature in this instance that I wanted to ramp up with the tentacles. I wanted the tentacles to wrap around all of the creepy Funfair elements just to create something truly insane, truly epic and mad. Now, the main thing that I want to put across for this video is, even though this looks really complicated and long-winded, there are only 4 to 5 main techniques used in a piece like this. So it's not rocket science, nothing here is truly groundbreaking like what you'd see on a Redowan video. It's just it's been repeated a lot of times for a lot of elements, so that's why it looks so crazy and so deranged. So the first main thing here really is selecting the stocks and then cutting out the stock elements that you need and moving them into position. So that is Photoshop 101, very straightforward, very basic. Now the next tip is adding shadow effects. So an adjustment layer is created, set to exposure. You pull the slider down to darken everything, then you hit invert, so the layer mask for that exposure layer is set to black. That means you cannot see anything. Okay, and then using the soft edge brush, hit B for brush, choose a bog standard soft edge brush, and then selectively paint back in the exposure. What that does is it adds a shadow, and that is repeated for almost every single element. So that tentacle underneath the mouth, an exposure adjustment layer was added and then selectively painted in. Now if you use a clipping mask, so hold down Alt and click, it will make sure that your edits are restrained to the pixel data of the layer below. Now if you're an absolute newbie, that sounds really complicated. Just do a YouTube search for clipping masks. It's a commonly used process in Photoshop. Again, not particularly groundbreaking, but that's the beauty of this particular piece. Even though it looks insane, the techniques that have been used here are very, very simple. Now that exposure layer to the right, you can see has no clipping mask, so that's not limited to the pixels below. Moving the flying weird witches around, I didn't like the railings coming through on that, so create a selection around those elements, make selection, and then using that layer mask to control the opacity, because I didn't like those railings coming through the fabric. Here we've got more action of cutting out the different fairground creatures to be put in that foreground. So the basic composition of this is the hero element in the middle, the main focal point, which is the tentacle banshee, and then here you can see the Funfair creatures being incorporated and brought in a kind of U-shaped composition, so it's surrounding the kind of view piece. And if you think back to the film The Labyrinth, when all of the goblins are looking down into the baby's crib, and it's just a sea of horrific faces. That's kind of what I was going for this piece. A sea of really bizarre looking Funfair creatures looking at the viewer in a compact and crowded way. Now, I've included this camera raw footage in here because this is a process that was used for every stock element. So they were all different photos with different lighting sources, and a lot of the elements that I bring in, they were shot in daylight. So one of my favorite go-to ways to edit things on the fly is to just use the camera raw filter. So that would be filter, camera raw, and then you go in there and you can tweak the settings. Now, if you didn't want to permanently apply those settings, you could right click on the layer and go convert to smart object, then do the camera raw. And if you need to backtrack or change anything with the camera raw, because you changed the layer to a smart filter, you can always go back and do that. I'm quite new to using smart objects for layers, but since watching an Abby Esparza video, I've got into it and I've been using it more and more in my own workflow. Now then, if you want to ramp up the horror on any piece, just add white eyes. Very fast, but it gives that kind of demonic vibe. And here you can see that exposure layer for the shadow with the clipping mask, and all of that I was painting down with a soft edge brush was limited to the clown stock image because there was a clipping mask in place. Again, we've got the camera raw for editing the individual elements, and then the exposure with a clipping mask to lay down the shadows. Pen tool, create the path, fill with white, and that's the white eyes. So very, very basic stuff. Cutting out the stock image, doing a tweak with camera raw to get the levels right, and then the exposure, and then adding the white eyes. And that process that you saw there was repeated for every single one of these elements. Again, I didn't want to show everything in a linear order because you'd be bored, but this is the cliff notes of what went down. With the fairground stuff in place, it was then a case of intertwining all of these different tentacles in and out of all of these creature elements. Some tentacles went into the mouth, so for that, use a layer mask. That shadow there, you can see the exposure being used once again. Just an exposure adjustment layer with a clipping mask set to the pixel data below. That makes sure that all of those edits and adjustments are limited and it doesn't spill over the edges, just like colouring books when you was younger. So a lot of tweaking and a lot of back and forth with these tentacle elements. And here you can see creating a selection around the teeth because I want to chop that out. So use a layer mask there, and then because it was going up into the mouth, just need some shadow. The same trick once again, looks great but very simple to do. This is not unachievable for any of you guys. It's just how far you want to take the repetition and how complex you want to go with your artwork. Once all of those edits and adjustments were done to all of these kind of creatures, the next stage was the rim lighting. Now, a lot of the inspiration for this piece was the old painted movie posters. They're very stylized, so they have exaggerated rim lights on the edges. Because I'm going to be putting loads of haze and glow into this piece, that'll be emitting light from the center mass of the artwork. So these are the rim lights that are catching. Now, I have to give a shout out to Zen Slabs. Those guys sent me a tablet through. I've never really been a tablet user, but I've started picking it up and learning it for the sake of the channel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flash up the settings for the Zen Slabs tablet that I use to do all of this manual work, these highlights that you can see happening right here. Now then, for our channel, we sell our own products, so we're not actually dependent on sponsors for the livelihood of this channel. So I can be 100% honest with how I got on with this tablet. Now, I've got to say, I've used lots of different tablets over the years, but this is probably the absolute best tablet I've ever used. It's called the Zen Slabs Medium bundle, and I'm not just saying that because they sent me a free one. I'm saying that because the software and the hardware, everything very high quality. I managed to start using it straight away without any issues at all. My problem that I had with previous tablets They were either too big, there were too many cables, setting it up to use it for an artwork was just too much of a hassle. So what I ended up doing was just not using tablets for anything, because I couldn't be bothered to plug all the cables in. I had a Wacom Cintiq before. It just seemed like using a bazooka to kill a gnat. And then I used some smaller cheapy Chinese ones, but then the functionality of the software wasn't great. So the Zen Slabs Medium was really like the Goldilocks tablet for me. It had enough features and the hardware was sturdy enough, and within minutes of setting it up I was using it, and ever since I have set it up I've used it for almost every project since. So that is my absolute 100% honest appraisal of the Zen Slabs Medium. For me it works great, for you it might not. If you're interested in getting a tablet, just look into it and figure it out for yourself whether it fulfills your needs. Even though I said I didn't get on well with the Wacom Cintiq before, the other guys on the photomanipulation team, Abby Esparza, Christian Bentelan, they use the Cintiq and they swear by it. So don't take my word for it, guys. For me personally, the Zen Slab Medium is the best tablet for me, but other guys on the team, they prefer to use the Cintiq and they're not annoyed about all of the wires and the setup and everything. So take that as you will. Let's crack on. Now the highlights have been added using the same technique as the exposure, just a clipping mask, and here I've used a like a smoke brush to create this ethereal haze behind all of the elements, and this is from the DEHARME brush set. I think there's a freebie version of this available on DeviantArt, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link to that in the description below. And I found what I wanted to do was create an ethereal hazy glow behind the elements. I cycled through a few brushes. I tried a cloud brush, it worked really well. Like I said earlier on, I'm not an expert at using a tablet or doing this hands-on type of work, so this was a learning experience for me as well. With some of that haze laid down, I wanted to start tweaking and experimenting with a color cast. Simple process for this. I put a gradient map adjustment layer on. I always use the option via the bottom of the layer stack, the circle cut in half. Changed that gradient map to overlay, brought it down to between 50 and 60%, and then pulled up the gradient map options and just cycled through until I found one that kind of fit the overall aesthetic I was looking for. I tried some different things, went back and forth. Tried some green tones, orange tones. I think I did end up settling for something from the purple panel, which seemed to work best with the atmosphere and lighting of this scene. And like I said earlier on, I wanted something really colourful, really over the top and really garish. So that's what you can see coming together here. So with those adjustment layers, what we call that is a global processing. So when you do a color adjustment that affects everything, we normally call that global processing, something that affects the entire scene as opposed to being limited to just a smaller element. So it's that DEHARME cloud brush in action again, and here you can see what this cloud brush is doing is kind of pushing forward this element so it doesn't merge together with everything else like a pixel soup. You could argue that this is a little bit over the top, but this is an over the top piece. It's just absolutely ridiculous, the whole thing. So restraint did not exist for this particular artwork. It was just chaos. Everything in the kitchen sink. How mad could we go? How demented could this piece end up being? So the rim lights and the haze were added to all of the creature elements, and this process here is what I'm calling at the moment Ghetto overpaint. Now there's a method of overpainting where you create a new layer, you sample colors from the pixels below, and then repaint the image over the top. But this is the cheap, fast method. By this time I'd already put about 12 to 15 hours into the artwork. I didn't have the stamina to do a full-blown overpaint, so I went for this Ghetto overpaint technique to give it a more stylized movie poster, painted 80s poster feel. To do this Ghetto overpaint, create a new layer at the top of the stack, get your smudge tool and click on sample all layers. For the actual brush that I used for this, I used like a sketch brush That was from Imada1. I tried looking for the brush, I could not find it. Sorry about that guys, but any sketch brush will work for this particular process. Because sample all layers is active, on the blank layer it's going to sample whatever is visible below and repaint that with the smudge effect on the top layer that's active. And when you are using the smudge brush, the idea is to follow the lines of direction and the lines of light, so you don't smudge sideways over and kind of go over the lines, as it were. What you can see on screen is a pretty good demonstration of that in action. The smudge brush is following the lines of direction of the pixel data there, so everything flows and looks cohesive, and that's what you can see coming together there. Now, about 3/4 of the work what went into the compositing, literally cutting out every aspect, and then the final quarter of the work was going through that smudge overpaint process. Took a very long time. What you're seeing here is the final processing of the flattened image. So to create the flattened image, I created a stamped layer. That's Command Alt Shift and E, and that will create a stamped layer of everything at the top of the layer stack. I'm using a plugin here, Nick Collection Color Effects Pro 5. This one's really good for the detail extractor, which works awesome for horror artworks. Clinton Lofthouse uses this detail extractor quite a lot, and I use it for this one as well. So there you have it, how to create absolute insanity with just a few simple techniques. Anybody can do this, be sure to give it a go yourself. Appreciate you tuning in for this one guys. The next video coming up is me building a lion out of motorbike parts. I think you'll get a kick out of that one. Thanks for tuning in, catch you in the next one.